Hi everyone, welcome back or welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, I would love for you to subscribe to this channel and give this video a thumbs up. So this year was a pretty monumental year for me when it came to reading because I had never really been like such a book lover. I don't know why. I mean, I always grew up reading books. It's just I never really went out of my way to go and do it for entertainment. But this year I really got into reading because I found someone's channel. Her name is Steph, and I'll leave her link in the description because she's really helped me get back into reading. I don't know how she did it, but she made it seem like so much fun and that reading was an immersive experience and I never got to enjoy it like that. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try this. I want to read, I want to do something else besides stay on my phone. So I started picking up books around summer of this year. So the first part of this video is essentially me talking about what I've read from the earliest date to now. And then the second part will be top ranking and how much I enjoyed each book. So the first book that I read this year is called My Policeman. It is a really great read. I'm so glad that I started with this one because it really got me back in. So I started reading this book in June, I believe, of 2021. This book is essentially about two main characters. There's really three, but the two main narrators are Marion and Patrick. They're both in love with someone named Tom. And it's a really important novel because it takes place in the 1950s where being gay and being out is very against the rules. It's not something that you do, and so it goes through the tribulations of that and you see the side effects that it has on people's lives. So I really enjoyed this. I mean, I think it's very heart-wrenching at times, but at the end of the day, books are meant for entertainment and I was definitely entertained. I was immersed in this for a hot minute, so if you want a good read, I would definitely recommend reading this one. The next book that I started reading was Beach Read. I enjoyed this book much more than I expected. I started reading this book in August of 2021 and I really enjoyed it. I found it on Book Talk because I didn't really know where to start after My Policeman. I only knew that book because of Harry Styles, but now it was my turn to kind of find some books that I really liked. So I went on Book Talk, people recommended this, and it's really good. So this book is essentially about two authors, January and August. January goes up to this old cabin that belonged to her dad. So she's out of her normal city and she's around a bunch of people that she doesn't know. And then she runs into someone named August that she actually met in college. But they meet up again like 10 years later. And they're both writers and they both are kind of in a writer's slump. And because of this, they decided to both switch genres. January starts to write what usually August writes, which is literary fiction, and August writes what January usually writes, which is like romance novels and happy endings. But in order to do that, they decide to hang out a little bit more so that each of them can kind of understand how each person writes their certain genres. And so it's definitely romantic at times. Some moments are a little steamy, and then there are a lot of heartfelt moments because January is in a cabin where her dad used to live, but her dad has unfortunately passed away. So she has a lot of internal conflict that you're reading because she is the narrator, and it makes me cry a lot because I don't know, I just connect with it in personal ways, and I think it's just an amazing read if you want something kind of light but also something with like a lot of importance. So I really recommend this one. So since I love Beach Read so much and the writer just really wrote in a way that I gravitated towards, I picked up another book that she had written. It's called People We Meet on Vacation. I started reading this one I think like a week or two after I ended Beach Read, so I would say early September because it was really good and to keep on top of reading books. And this one is about Poppy and Alex. It's another romance book and I think that both of them are very cute characters. They're kind of opposites in a way. And it kind of explains their relationship over several years and how they were both like friends and stuff, but then over time they became more than friends, but there was some like miscommunication, there were issues with that, so they hadn't talked for a while, now they're back together for something and the romance continues. And I think it's really great because I normally don't read like friends to lovers things. I don't know why, they just never really interested me, but this one's really good because there is a lot of conflict. And I know this might sound bad, but I enjoy books with a lot of conflict because it means like you're working towards that resolution throughout the whole book. So the payoff is so great, and when they get together, it's just, oh, it's so worth it. So I think that this is a good read if you really want a light romance book. Like I said, there is a bit of conflict, but honestly, it's not that crazy, so I really enjoyed this one. So far, all of the books that I have recommended are like romance novels, but I decided to switch it up a little bit, and I picked up this book called One of Us is Lying. It was recommended by a friend, and they said that it was like a really great read, they enjoyed it, and it's really like a mystery thing. I started reading this one also in September of 2021, right after I read People We Meet on Vacation, and it's really great. I enjoyed it, and it's about 4 teenagers, technically 5, who are all in detention, and something goes terribly wrong, and one of the characters named Simon dies. He literally just collapses and dies. Obviously, I don't want to spoil too much for you, so I'm not going to explain every little thing in the book, but the 4 main characters are Bronwyn, Addie, Nate, and Cooper, and they are now the top suspects of Simon's murder. Well, it turned into a murder investigation over time because no one knew what had happened to him, and then all of a sudden it was just so suspicious that everyone in the room survived except for Simon. So this whole book is about trying to figure out how Simon died, who really did it, because we don't know like if either one of them did it, if they're being framed. It's a whole thing, so it's a lot of like connect the dots mystery things, but I enjoyed it because it's also something young people can connect to. I connected to it. It wasn't like my favorite book out of all of the books that I've read this year, but I think that it's definitely something that if you're not into like romance novels, but you're also into like young adult fiction, this is something I would recommend for you to read. Okay, so between September and December, I didn't read at all. I was so mad at myself because I wanted to read so bad, but I was so busy with like all my finals and going to work, and then I had a couple things going on in November where I was literally never home. So the idea of reading a book was just like, that's not even possible, I can't do it. And then winter break happened, so luckily I have caught up on so much reading. I have had a lot of downtime to be able to sit down and actually read a book, and I've never read books this fast in my life. I will tell you, it's been about 2 weeks so far that I've been on winter break, and now I've read like 4 books in that time period. So I'm really proud of myself because that's never happened before. So let's get into those books. The first book that I picked up for winter break is The Love Hypothesis. This one was really good. It's a bit of a light read just because it's a very cute novel and there's a lot of like cute scenarios going on in this. It's about 2 characters. One is Olive and one is Adam. Olive is a grad student at the same place that Adam is a teacher. Luckily they're in college, so it's not some weird age gap thing. So essentially this book is about Olive trying to convince one of her friends that she's over her ex-boyfriend because Olive's friend is actually into Olive's ex-boyfriend. Olive says to this friend that she's going on a date, but she never specifies with who because she actually doesn't have a date. She's not interested in anybody. And Olive's also like a workaholic. She's just super busy all the time in science labs and stuff. So instead of going on a date that she said she was going on to her friend, she was at a lab in the school, and that friend finds Olive there and is really confused why she's there. So in order to prove that she was on a date, Olive pulls a random person aside and just kisses them, just randomly. And of course we know that person is Adam, and from then on we see them trying to navigate a fake relationship because Olive has to prove that she's dating Adam and that they've been together for a while and they're like so in love and all of that. And of course we all know what happens with fake dating. They actually start falling for each other, and it's so cute. I really enjoyed it, and there was even like a steamy part that I was not expecting. So if you really like romance and angst and waiting for characters to get together and all of that stuff, this is a good read. It's really light and I recommend it. I think a day or 2 after I read The Love Hypothesis, I actually picked up The Hating Game, and this book fell short a little bit for me, but it was fine. I think I just created a lot of expectations of this book in my head and it just didn't meet those expectations. But essentially, this book is about Lucy and Joshua. They both work together in this book publishing office, so it's a workplace romance, but it's also a workplace enemies to lovers romance because they hate each other so much in this, at least in the very beginning, and then all of a sudden there's a lot of tension, if you know what I'm saying. They start to grow feelings over time and it gets to be really awkward, but then they start to really like each other and it's obvious that to both of them they connect. It turns into, you know, enemies to lovers. They finally get together at the end. But like I said earlier, it didn't do much for me because I've read books before that are enemies to lovers. I'm so used to characters hating each other for the majority of the book. It wasn't really like this for me. Plus, I think for an enemies to lovers romance, I have to also hate one of the characters for me to feel like, oh, now they can be together. Now this feels like they've earned it and stuff. If you are looking for a starter thing to enemies to lover books, this is definitely a good start. I think I've just read too many to just like read this one. But otherwise, I still really enjoyed it. It was really cute. I also finally picked up The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which is so good. I mean, everyone's been saying it's like a life-changing thing, and I believed it, but I also was like, meh, it just looks like a Hollywood thing and someone with her husbands and all the different crazy stories she probably had. Which, yeah, that's what it is, but it's also like you don't realize like how crazy people's lives can be when you're famous until you read something like this. Obviously, it's a work of fiction. I'm not sure every celebrity's life is actually like this. It's about writer Monique going to interview Evelyn Hugo when she's much older, and it's just about her writing a biography on Evelyn Hugo's life and what she's done over the entire span of her life to explain to like the public who's always assumed things about her, who she really was, what she really did behind the scenes. So I think it's a really important read. It gave me a lot of lessons. The biggest one I took out of it is just like live your life, don't regret it. Because at the end of the day, like everyone's gonna live and die. You gotta accept all the situations that you're put in and all of the different scenarios and choices that you make. So honestly, I think it's a really good read if you want something really heartfelt. I enjoyed it a lot. And then the last book I read, I finished, I think like 2 days ago, not even, is It Ends With Us. I was expecting it to be this major romance book, and it is for a good chunk of it. It was split into 2 parts, and I didn't realize that because when I opened the book and started reading the first page, it said part 1, and I'm like, part 1? What? So it's kind of like a love triangle thing for a good chunk of the book where Lily, Ryle, and Atlas are kind of in this love triangle thing, at least in like Lily's head, she's in this love triangle because one is a childhood romance, that's with Atlas, and then the other romance she's having is with the guy she's currently with, Ryle. And so it goes back and forth between how she's gonna move on from her childhood love to the current love she's in. And it pulls at the heartstrings sometimes because you're just so sad for her at certain moments. She also grew up in a very toxic household, which has affected her choice in like men and how she tries to stand up for herself and stand up for other women and all of these things. And the second part is just beyond sad, if you know what I'm talking about. I loved the end of this book. I mean, I wasn't expecting the last part of it, but I think that's why it felt like just so rewarding to see this character just be really strong at the end of everything. And I just bawled my eyes out. And usually I don't do that with books. The only books that I really cried to this year were this one and Beach Read. Everyone should read this because it's really important. It's just talking about really like, don't judge situations unless you're in them, and hard choices have to be made in order for people to just live their lives as happy as possible. So I really enjoyed this. I'd probably pick this up again if I wanted a good cry. And so yeah, that was this book that I finally read. And those are all the books that I read this year. I'm gonna just rank them really quick for you guys. I'm actually editing right now, and I realized that last clip was not as specific as it should have been, so I'm actually ranking them out of whether or not I would reread them again, and whether or not I would go out of my way to go and do that, and then I rate them out of 10. I know I should have probably rated them out of 5, but I just did it out of 10 in the moment. So there's some context for you guys. So the book that I really enjoyed this year, one that has stuck with me and I recommended to people the entire year, is Beach Read. And you might be surprised by this because I said it was like kind of a light read, but it also, like I said, had a lot of conflict in it. It made me cry and I just was so invested in these characters. So this is the one that I think is a 10 out of 10. I love it so much. The second book that I'd probably reread is actually The Love Hypothesis. This might be surprising, but I think it's just something light that I could reread really fast. If I'm having a really busy time in my life and I haven't read a book in a while, I would pick up this because number one, I know what's gonna happen and I'm not gonna feel obligated to pick it up because I don't know what's gonna happen throughout the book. So if I don't finish it, I won't feel too bad about it. But it's also really light and I enjoyed it. I had a good time. I was really invested in their story as well. So I definitely recommend this one. This one's like, I guess, an 8 out of 10. So that one's good too. The next one I want to read again is actually My Policeman. I read this in July, so this was the first book I picked up and I haven't read it since. I really want to reread it again. I know the movie's coming out in 2022, which is next year. So the closer we get to the movie coming out, the more I'm probably going to be reading this just to understand all the different scenarios, all the plots. Because obviously with book to movie adaptations, it's so hard to get all of the scenes from a book into a movie because it's like you have a time constraint from like an hour to hour and a half or 2 hours to tell an entire story. So I want to make sure I kind of know everything in this book. so that when I see it, I can kind of compare the two. But like I said, this one's really good. I would probably rate this one 9 out of 10. The fourth book I'd probably pick up is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I'd probably rate this one like a 7 out of 10. The only reason I rate it kind of low is because I felt like in the middle of it got a little slow for me. But I picked it up like immediately after. It was great still. I feel like if I had the time to sit down and read the whole thing again, I would, but this isn't something I'd pick up just for a light read. So the book after that one would be People We Meet on Vacation. I'd probably give this one 6 or 7 out of 10 as well, because it's such a light read for me. But there was not as much conflict, I guess, as the other 4 books that I recommended. So I think this is something that is a really great light read if you want something easy. The next book that I would probably pick up is One of Us is Lying, and I think it's a great book. The only thing is, because I know what happens finally, since this is a mystery novel, I am not gravitated towards like reading it again because I know everything that happens, all the different plot twists, the ending I know, so it's not like I'm going to be sitting there trying to like read all of this so I can figure out like all of the things unraveling in the story, because I know what happens. So I guess if I were to rate this, I'd give this like a 6 out of 10 out of the books that I've read this year. The next one I would pick up is It Ends With Us, and even though I just read it and I love this book so much, I need to be in the mental space to really sit down and read it. And again, like I said earlier, this is a book where if I really needed a good cry, I'd pick it up. I would actually rate this a 9 out of 10. And the final one that I'd probably pick up is The Hating Game. Like I said, it fell short for me, which I was so sad about because I created such expectations of it. But I also said that I would want to reread this again so that I could try and like read it without any expectations now that I know what happens. Kind of give this one like a 4 or 5 out of 10 because it's not what I thought it was gonna be, but it was still a good book if you really enjoyed it. I'm sorry if I'm ranking it really low, but that's just how I saw the book. Those are all of the books that I've read this year. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please comment down below what you guys have read this year and what you guys can recommend me, because I want to read so many more books. I'll also leave my Goodreads down below if you want to follow me on there. And I think in 2022, I'm gonna read way more books than I did this year. Like I said, this is a year where I actually started reading and enjoying it and doing it for fun. If you really like this video, like I said, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm trying to post a little more often now, especially in the coming year. But other than that, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!